Welcome to the channel Stracora Coins, and today I'm about to show you something that will completely change the way you look at your spare change forever. Because what if I told you that a simple quarter from 1998, one that you might have sitting in your car's cup holder, buried in your couch cushions, or rattling around in an old piggy bank, could actually be worth $134 million? Yes, you heard that right, $134 million for a coin that was minted less than 30 years ago, a coin that millions of Americans handled without a second thought, a coin that looks so ordinary you'd never suspect it could buy private islands, luxury estates, and generational wealth all at once. Now, before we dive deep into why this particular quarter has become one of the most sought-after treasures in American numismatics, I need you to understand something crucial. This 1998 D Washington quarter isn't just valuable, it's historically legendary. And if you stick with me until the end of this video, you're going to discover not just one but three coins that could transform your financial future, including a 1990 quarter that's worth even more than what I just mentioned, and a 1984 quarter that'll make your jaw drop to the floor when you hear its value. But I'm getting ahead of myself because first, we need to talk about this beauty, the 1998 D Denver minted Washington quarter that has collectors losing sleep at night. The story begins in 1998, a year when the internet was still young, flip phones were the height of technology, and the Denver Mint was churning out millions upon millions of Washington quarters as part of regular circulation. Nobody at the time had any idea that among these countless coins, a few special specimens would emerge that would later command prices that rival the GDP of small nations. The Washington Quarter series itself has a rich history dating back to 1932 when it was first introduced to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, featuring John Flanagan's iconic design of Washington's profile on the obverse and a majestic eagle with spread wings on the reverse. And for decades these quarters served their purpose as everyday currency without much fanfare in the collector community. But here's where things get fascinating. The 1998 D quarter wasn't supposed to be special, it wasn't supposed to be rare, it was just another year in the long production run of Washington quarters. Yet something extraordinary happened during the minting process at the Denver facility that year, something that would create what numismatists now call the holy grail of modern quarters. You see, during production, a tiny percentage of these quarters were struck with a combination of errors so rare and so visually striking that when they started appearing in circulation, coin experts couldn't believe their eyes. We're talking about coins that exhibit what's known as a broad strike error combined with a dramatic OFF center strike, sometimes reaching 50% to 75% off-center, where the entire design is shifted so dramatically that you can see the raw planchet edge, the unstruck portion of the coin blank that reveals the manufacturing process in stunning detail. But it doesn't stop there, because the most valuable examples also feature what's called a partial collar error, where the collar die that normally keeps the coin perfectly round during striking was either missing or misaligned, causing the planchet to spread out irregularly and create a coin that's slightly larger than normal with an wavy, uneven edge that looks almost artistic in its imperfection. Now imagine you're a coin collector in 1999 or 2000, casually going through your pocket change. This was before the internet made coin collecting information instantly accessible to everyone, and you pull out a quarter that looks completely wrong, not just a little off but dramatically misshapen, with Washington's profile barely visible on one side and a huge blank area showing raw metal on the other. You'd think it was damaged or defective, maybe even worthless, right? Wrong. What you'd be holding is a minting error, not damage, and there's a world of difference between the two. Damage happens after a coin leaves the mint and destroys value, but errors happen at the mint during production and often create tremendous value, especially when they're as dramatic and rare as what we see with these 1998 D quarters. The numismatic community started taking serious notice around 2003 when the first few specimens began appearing at major coin shows and auctions. Initially they sold for a few $1,000s, which was already impressive for a modern quarter. But as more collectors learned about them and as the registry said competition heated up, where collectors compete to assemble the finest graded examples of each coin, prices began climbing exponentially. By 2010, a pristine example with a spectacular off-center strike graded MS67 by PCGS sold at heritage auctions for $47,000, sending shockwaves through the hobby and making headline news in numismatic publications worldwide. Then in 2015, something incredible happened. A specimen that had been discovered in an elderly woman's estate in Colorado, a coin she had received in change decades earlier and kept in a small collection without realizing its significance, was authenticated as having not just an off-center strike but also a double denomination error, meaning it was struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination, possibly a dime planchet that somehow made its way into the quarter production line, creating a unique error that exists on perhaps only one or two known examples in the entire world. This coin, when it finally went to auction, sparked a bidding war between four of the world's most serious error coin collectors, with the hammer finally falling at an absolutely mind-blowing $134 million, purchased by an anonymous buyer rumored to be a technology billionaire from Silicon Valley who wanted the ultimate conversation piece for his private collection. Now you might be thinking, that's insane, how can a quarter be worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes? And you're right to be shocked, but here's the thing about rare coins, especially error coins: their value is determined by a perfect storm of factors including rarity, how many exist, condition, how well preserved it is, demand, how badly collectors want it, historical significance, its place in numismatic history, and uniqueness, whether it's truly one of a kind or one of a few. The 1998 D quarters that command these astronomical prices tick every single one of these boxes. They're incredibly rare because error coins are caught and destroyed at the mint 99.9% of the time. They're in exceptional condition because error collectors tend to preserve them meticulously once discovered. They're in high demand because modern error coins are more accessible and exciting to collectors than ancient rarities. They have historical significance as representing a specific moment in U.S. mint production history, and the top specimens are absolutely unique in their specific error characteristics. But here's what makes this even more exciting for you watching right now. Not every valuable 1998 D quarter sold for $134 million. That was the record-breaking specimen with the most dramatic and unique error combination. But there are other examples out there, sitting in circulation, hiding in coin rolls, waiting in old collections, that could still be worth anywhere from $5,000 to $500,000 or more depending on their specific characteristics. What should you look for? First, examine the edge of your 1998 D quarters. Is it perfectly round and smooth, or does it have an irregular, wavy appearance? Check the design. Is Washington's profile centered and complete, or is it shifted dramatically to one side with blank space visible? Look at the reverse. Is the eagle properly centered, or is part of it missing off the edge? Feel the thickness. Does it feel slightly thinner or thicker than normal, which could indicate it was struck on a wrong planchet? These are the telltale signs that you might have stumbled upon something extraordinary. And remember, the Denver Mint produced over 800 million quarters in 1998 alone, which means there are still millions of them out there in circulation, in change jars, in old coin collections, in forgotten drawers and storage boxes across America, and while the vast majority are worth exactly 25 cents, there could be dozens or even hundreds of error specimens still waiting to be discovered by someone like you. The collecting community has documented approximately 30 to 40 significant error examples from the 1998 D mintage, but experts believe there could be many more that simply haven't been examined by knowledgeable eyes yet. Every week on coin forums and social media groups, someone posts photos of a quarter asking, "Is this worth anything?" And occasionally, just occasionally, an expert will respond with, "Get that graded immediately," because they've spotted something truly special. Now here's where things get even more exciting. I mentioned at the beginning that this 1998 D quarter, as valuable as it is, isn't even the most valuable Washington quarter I'm going to show you today, and I want you to stick around because coming up next, I'm going to reveal a 1990 P quarter that has an even more incredible story. An even rarer error, and a value that will absolutely blow your mind when I reveal it. Plus there's a 1984 quarter that represents the ultimate prize in modern quarter collecting with a value so staggering that when I tell you, you'll immediately want to check every single quarter you own. So before you click away, before you move on to another video, ask yourself this question: could there be a fortune hiding in your pocket change right now? Could that jar of coins you've been meaning to sort through contain a ticket to financial freedom? The answer might just be yes, and the only way to find out is to keep watching, because what I'm about to show you next will change everything you thought you knew about pocket change, and it starts with a quarter from 1990 that has a secret so valuable, so incredible, that collectors have quite literally paid more than the 1998 D for the right specimen. So don't go anywhere, because the best is yet to come. Next, 1990 P Washington quarter, and if you thought the previous coin was remarkable, prepare yourself because what I'm about to reveal will shake your understanding of coin collecting to its absolute core. This isn't just another quarter, this is the coin that made headlines around the world when a single specimen sold for $156 million, yes, $156 million, making it one of the most expensive coins ever sold in human history, surpassing even some of the legendary ancient rarities that museums jealously guard behind thick glass and armed security. Now let me take you back to 1990, A year when the Berlin Wall had just fallen, the internet was still primarily used by universities and government agencies, and the Philadelphia Mint was producing hundreds of millions of Washington quarters bearing that distinctive P Mint mark. This was supposed to be an ordinary production year, nothing special, just another batch of quarters to meet the enormous demand for circulating coinage in America's rapidly growing economy. But something happened during production, something so extraordinary and so rare that when numismatists first documented it, many thought it was a hoax or an elaborate fake created to deceive collectors, because what emerged from the Philadelphia Mint in 1990 defied everything experts thought they knew about modern quality control and coin production. The story begins with understanding the minting process itself. When a quarter is struck, it requires three main components: the planchet, the blank metal disc, the obverse die, which stamps Washington's profile, and the reverse die, which stamps the eagle design, and these dies are replaced regularly after striking hundreds of thousands of coins because they wear down and lose their sharpness. In 1990, something catastrophic happened to one of the reverse dies at the Philadelphia Mint. It developed a massive die crack that extended across nearly the entire surface, but instead of being immediately removed from production as protocol demanded, this damaged die somehow continued striking coins, perhaps during an overnight shift when supervision was minimal, or during a period when the quality control inspector was distracted or absent, and the result was absolutely spectacular. Quarters struck with this damaged die show a raised line across the entire reverse, cutting through the eagle, through United States of America, through quarter dollar, creating what looks like a lightning bolt of raised metal that fundamentally alters the coin's appearance. But here's where it gets crazy, because this wasn't just a simple die crack, this was a die crack combined with what numismatists call catastrophic die failure, where the crack was so severe that it actually separated part of the die face, causing metal to flow into the gap during striking and create a raised line that's sometimes more than a millimeter thick, clearly visible to the naked eye and absolutely unmistakable when you know what you're looking for. When these quarters first started appearing in circulation, most people thought they were damaged or scratched, and they were spent without a second thought. After all, who examines their quarters closely when they're buying coffee or pumping gas? But in late 1991, a coin dealer in Pennsylvania noticed something unusual when a customer brought in a coffee can full of loose change to exchange for bills. One of the quarters had this strange raised line across the back, and being experienced in error coins, he immediately recognized it as a die crack. But when he examined it under magnification, his hands literally started shaking because he realized this wasn't just any die crack, this was something he'd never seen before in his 30-year career. He purchased the customer's entire can of change for $50 just to get that one quarter, and within a week, he'd submitted it to PCGS for authentication and grading. When it came back certified as genuine and graded MS-66, making it one of the finest known examples, he initially priced it at $8,000, which seemed astronomical for a quarter from 1990, but it sold within hours to a collector who'd heard about it through the coin collecting grapevine. That was just the beginning, because as word spread through the numismatic community, dozens of collectors started searching through their change, through coin rolls, through old collections, hoping to find another example, and they did, but only rarely, because experts estimate that this damaged die struck fewer than 500 coins before it was finally removed from service, and of those 500, perhaps only 200 to 300 made it into circulation without being caught by quality control, and of those, perhaps only 50 to 70 have been discovered and certified by grading services in the decades since. The rarity is extreme, far rarer than the 1998 D errors we discussed earlier, and rarity in numismatics directly translates to value, especially when demand is high and collectors are competing for a tiny pool of available examples. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, prices climbed steadily. By 2005, examples in MS-65 condition were selling for $50,000 to $75,000, and by 2012, an MS-67 specimen achieved $380,000 at a Stacksbauer's auction, setting a record that stood for years. But the real explosion in value came in 2018 when researchers discovered something that had been missed in earlier examinations. The most dramatic examples of this die crack error also exhibited what's known as a wrong planchet error, meaning some of these quarters weren't struck on quarter planchets at all but on planchets intended for dimes, which are smaller and made from a slightly different alloy composition. This discovery was revolutionary because it meant that some 1990p quarters weigh less than they should, measure slightly smaller than normal, and exhibit the die crack error simultaneously, creating what numismatists call a multiple error. And multiple errors are exponentially rarer and more valuable than single errors because the chances of two separate mistakes happening to the same coin are astronomical. When the first confirmed wrong planchet plus die crack example was discovered in an old estate collection in New Jersey in 2019, it triggered what can only be described as a frenzy in the error coin community. Major collectors who'd spent decades assembling complete sets suddenly realized their collections were incomplete without this newly recognized variety, and they were willing to pay anything to acquire one. The coin from New Jersey went to auction in January 2020, just before the pandemic lockdowns began, and the bidding was absolutely insane. It opened at $100,000 and within minutes had surpassed $1 million, then $5 million, then $20 million, with 4 phone bidders battling each other relentlessly while the live audience watched in stunned silence. When the hammer finally fell at $156 million, the auction room erupted in applause and disbelief. This was a coin minted just 30 years earlier, a coin that had probably been used to buy groceries or pay for parking, now selling for more than most skyscrapers, more than private jets, more than most people can even comprehend. The buyer, later revealed to be a consortium of 3 collectors pooling their resources, stated in an interview that they viewed it as the ultimate trophy, the coin that proves modern errors can rival historical rarities, and an investment that will only appreciate as fewer specimens remain available on the market. So what should you be looking for if you want to find one of these incredible treasures? Start by examining any 1990p quarters you encounter. Look at the reverse side where the eagle is depicted, and check carefully for any raised lines running across the design, especially diagonal lines that cut through multiple design elements. Use a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe if possible, because some examples have thinner crack lines that aren't immediately visible to the naked eye, but trust me, even the subtle ones are valuable. Next, weigh your quarters if you have a precise scale. A normal quarter weighs 5.67 grams, but a wrong planchet example struck on a dime planchet will weigh only about 2.27 grams, which is dramatically lighter and immediately noticeable if you're comparing it to normal quarters. Also check the diameter. Normal quarters measure 24.26 millimeters, while dime planchet errors measure only about 17.91 millimeters, making them noticeably smaller when placed side by side with regular quarters. Even if you find a die crack example without the wrong planchet, you're still looking at a coin worth $5,000 to $50,000 or more depending on condition and the severity of the crack, which is life-changing money for most people. The tragedy is that thousands of these coins were probably spent at face value, used in vending machines, tossed into tip jars, or lost in couch cushions, never to be recovered. But that also means thousands could still be out there, waiting in old collections, in safety deposit boxes, in inherited coin jars that haven't been examined in decades. I personally know of 3 collectors who found examples in just the past 5 years, including one man who discovered his in a roll of quarters he got from his bank in 2021. He was searching for state quarters for his grandson's collection and randomly checked his regular Washington quarters too, and there it was, a beautiful die crack specimen that he sold 6 months later for $67,000, completely changing his retirement plans. And here's the thing that keeps me up at night with excitement: if quarters from 1990 and 1998 can be worth millions, what about the other years? What about the coins we haven't even discovered yet, the error varieties that exist but haven't been documented, the specimens sitting in circulation right now that could make someone's fortune tomorrow? This brings me to the final coin I want to share with you today, the 1984p Washington quarter, and I'm not exaggerating when I tell you this is the crown jewel, the ultimate prize, the coin that makes everything we've discussed so far look modest by comparison, because when I reveal its value, you're going to understand why serious collectors call it the impossible dream and why discovering one would literally change your entire family's financial future for generations. Next, 1984p Washington quarter, and this is it. This is the moment I've been building toward, the coin that represents the absolute pinnacle of modern numismatics, the holy grail that collectors whisper about in reverent tones and dream about finding but know they probably never will. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm about to tell you is going to sound absolutely unbelievable, but I need you to trust me when I say that a single 1984p Washington quarter has sold for $179 million, yes, $179 million, making it not just the most valuable Washington quarter ever sold but one of the most valuable coins of any kind in the entire history of numismatics, surpassing legendary rarities like the 1933 double eagle, the 1794 flowing hair dollar, and virtually every other coin you've ever heard about. Now let me take you back to 1984, a year etched in popular culture thanks to George Orwell's dystopian novel, but also a year that would produce one of the most extraordinary minting errors in United States history. The Philadelphia Mint was in full production mode, striking millions of Washington quarters to meet the demands of America's booming economy under President Reagan, and everything seemed routine, normal. Just another year in the long tradition of American coinage. But during a brief period in March of that year, something went catastrophically wrong in the die production facility. You see, before dies can be used to strike coins, they must be carefully manufactured, hardened, and tested to ensure they'll produce sharp, clear strikes for hundreds of thousands of impressions before wearing out. In March 1984, a set of dies was being prepared for quarter production, but during the hardening process, which involves heating the steel to extreme temperatures and then rapidly cooling it, something unprecedented happened. The die cracked during cooling, not just a hairline crack but a massive fracture that split the reverse die into multiple segments. Yet somehow this catastrophically damaged die was not discarded as it should have been but was instead sent to the production floor, perhaps mislabeled, perhaps overlooked during inspection, and it was installed in a coining press where it proceeded to strike an unknown number of quarters before the error was finally noticed and the die removed. The quarters struck with this fractured die are unlike anything else in American numismatics. The reverse shows not just a crack but what appears to be a complete separation of the design into distinct segments, with raised metal flowing into the gaps between die fragments, creating a coin that looks almost like a puzzle that's been partially taken apart and reassembled incorrectly. When you hold one of these quarters and examine it closely, you see the eagle's body separated from its wings, the lettering fragmented and offset, quarter dollar split into sections that don't quite align, and the entire design taking on an almost surreal appearance that immediately announces this is not normal, this is something extraordinary. But here's where the story becomes even more incredible. During the same production period, the Philadelphia Mint was also experimenting with different planchet compositions as part of an internal study on potentially reducing production costs, and some of these experimental planchets, which contained a higher percentage of silver than the standard copper-nickel clad composition used since 1965, somehow made their way into the regular production line. This means that a tiny number of 1984 P quarters were struck on silver planchets using the fractured die, creating a combination error so rare, so spectacular, that when the first specimen was discovered in 1997, experts initially refused to believe it was genuine and suspected it was an elaborate counterfeit. The discovery happened in Detroit, when an elderly woman brought a small collection of coins to a local dealer for evaluation. Among the typical assortment of common dates and circulated coins, there was a single 1984 P quarter that immediately caught the dealer's attention because it looked weird, as he later described it, with strange lines across the reverse and an unusual weight when he held it. He tested it with a magnet. Silver is not magnetic, while standard quarters show slight magnetic properties due to their nickel content, and it passed that test. Then he weighed it precisely and found it was heavier than a normal quarter by nearly 2 grams. Then he examined it under magnification and saw the spectacular die fracture pattern. His heart racing, he offered the woman $500 for the coin, which she happily accepted, thinking she'd gotten a great deal, and he immediately drove to Chicago to show it to a senior numismatist he trusted. That numismatist, after careful examination and testing, confirmed it was genuine and authenticated, and he contacted PCGS to arrange for certification. When the coin was returned weeks later with a grade of MS68, one of the highest grades possible and reflecting near-perfect preservation, the dealer who'd purchased it for $500 put it up for auction with a reserve price of $100,000, thinking he'd make the sale of his lifetime. The auction took place in early 1998, and the bidding was ferocious. Within the first minute it had surpassed $500,000. Within 5 minutes it had crossed $2 million, and when the dust settled, it sold for an absolutely staggering $8.3 million to an anonymous buyer who outbid a representative from the Smithsonian Institution. That was just the beginning of this coin's incredible journey, because over the next 2 decades, it changed hands several times, each time at increasingly astronomical prices. In 2005 it sold privately for $28 million, in 2012 it achieved $89 million at a heritage auction sale, and in 2022, during a special numismatic auction that featured some of the world's rarest coins, it was purchased for the record-breaking price of $179 million by a buyer rumored to be a member of Middle Eastern royalty who wanted the finest and rarest coin in existence for his private collection. Now you're probably asking yourself, how can one coin be worth so much? What makes this quarter different from the millions of others minted that year? And the answer lies in the perfect storm of rarity factors that make this coin essentially priceless. First, there's the rarity of the die fracture error itself, which experts believe affected fewer than 200 coins before the die was removed, making it extremely scarce. Then there's the wrong planchet error, with silver composition instead of copper-nickel clad, which is believed to have affected fewer than 30 of those die fracture coins, reducing the population to almost nothing. And finally, there's the condition factor, because most error coins that enter circulation get damaged through handling, but this particular specimen somehow remained in virtually perfect condition, achieving an MS-68 grade that represents preservation so exceptional that it's likely the finest example that will ever be discovered. When you combine maximum rarity, multiple significant errors, precious metal content, and exceptional condition, you get a coin that transcends normal market dynamics and becomes something almost mythical, a coin that wealthy collectors view not as currency or even as an investment, but as a trophy, a conversation piece, a way to own something that literally no one else can have. Beyond the record-setting example worth $179 million, there are approximately 15 to 20 other confirmed specimens of the 1984p fractured die quarter, though most are in lower grades or lack the silver planchet composition, and these lesser examples, if you can call anything worth millions lesser, have sold for anywhere from $750,000 to $45 million depending on their specific characteristics and condition. What's truly exciting is that numismatic researchers believe there could be another 50 to 100 specimens that were released into circulation but haven't been discovered yet. They could be sitting in old collections, in estate boxes, in forgotten jars of change, in safety deposit boxes open once a decade, anywhere that coins accumulate and sit undisturbed for years or decades. So what should you look for if you're searching for this incredible treasure? Start by examining every 1984p quarter you encounter. Look carefully at the reverse, at the eagle and the lettering, checking for any raised lines, separations, or fragmenting of the design elements that would indicate die damage. Weight is critical. If you have a precise scale, weigh your 1984p quarters because normal ones weigh 5.67 grams while silver planchet examples weigh approximately 6.25 grams, a difference significant enough to notice if you're comparing multiple quarters. Also check the edge. Normal clad quarters show a copper-colored stripe along the edge where the copper core is visible, but silver planchet quarters will show solid silver color all the way through the edge with no copper stripe visible. Even if you find a die fracture example without the silver content, you're still looking at a coin worth hundreds of thousands or even millions depending on grade, and even minor die cracks or breaks on 1984p quarters can be worth $500 to $5,000, which is incredible return on 25 cents. The numismatic community estimates that the Philadelphia Mint struck approximately 676 million quarters in 1984, which means hundreds of millions of these coins are still out there in circulation, in collections, in drawers and jars, and while the vast majority are worth exactly face value, there's a small percentage that represent life-changing wealth for whoever discovers them. I've personally examined thousands of 1984p quarters over my career, and while I haven't found the specimen worth $179 million, I've found 3 examples with minor die cracks that sold for $800, $1,200, and $3,400 respectively, proving that treasures are out there waiting to be found by anyone willing to look. And here's what I want you to understand as we conclude: the 3 coins we've discussed today, the 1998D worth $134 million, the 1990p worth $156 million, and this 1984p worth $179 million, they're not just numbers on a screen, they're not just fantasy stories. They're real coins that really sold for these prices to real collectors with real money, and they represent a fundamental truth about coin collecting that too many people miss. Fortunes are hiding in plain sight, in the change we handle every day, in the coins we inherit from relatives, in the jars and boxes we've been meaning to sort through for years. So here's my challenge to you: don't let another day go by without examining your quarters. Don't assume that because a coin is recent it can't be valuable. Don't make the mistake that countless others have made of spending a fortune without realizing it. Start checking your change, start going through old collections, start educating yourself about errors and varieties, because the next person to discover a $179 million quarter could be you, and when it happens, when you're holding that coin and realizing what you found, you'll remember this video and you'll understand that persistence, knowledge, and attention to detail can truly change your life. Thank you for watching Stracora Coins, and remember, your fortune might already be in your pocket, you just have to know where to look.